Coming down to the final swing of things here in the inaugural Big Ten men's basketball season, yeah, the Big Ten has to change the scheduling. Pretty stupid the way they did it.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. It's your team every day. And what we're talking about to start today, in addition to getting to previews of the Purdue game, recap of the UCLA-Wisconsin women's game, we're starting with the thing that kind of affects both programs, the UCLA men and the women, just alongside all the other programs in Big Ten play. The scheduling is stupid. Absolutely stupid. Why is it stupid? Because we've sold our souls to TV. That's really what it's come down to in the world of college athletics. But because I can't talk down TV networks and TV people and everything with contracts to change it, there can be a better way to handle the scheduling for the Big Ten, especially during basketball season. Right? That's when it's really killer in this league, where they are hell-bent on, as Mick Cronin's talked about it, the 2 days in between games. So there's almost a game on every night of the week. It feels like you're playing 3 games a week. If you're a Big Ten fan, it feels like you've watched the UCLA men, because the men play 2 more conference games than the women. They play 20 versus the women's 18. UCLA this year had a forfeit, so they had a 17-game conference schedule. So generally, it feels like you're watching the men play every day, and the women, until you get to the back end of the schedule, feels like they're playing every other day as well. There's no need for that. Mick Cronin's talked about in previous press conference, hey, we don't need 2 days. Let's get the 1 day, keep these travel days to a minimum, and get them back into school. Get them back home, wherever you're going, to East Coast, in the Midwest, or especially for these schools out west, UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington. There's got to be a better way than having a schedule where UCLA and USC aren't even travel partners. All right? When is it up? You watch every single basketball season to this point, right? And wherever UCLA was playing during the conference schedule, you knew exactly where USC was playing, and vice versa, all right? Vice versa. You knew exactly where those two schools were playing. And at the moment, Oregon and Washington should be the travel partners. That's how it's supposed to be. No, they're playing games East, then West, then Midwest, then Super East, then back, and that team's going to go do the opposite. And then one team from the East is going to be waiting on the West Coast for 4 days, 3 days, and you're currently flying back, recovering for a full cross-country road trip. And the East Coast team's been waiting for you for 4 days. It's been more often than not that the team UCLA has played at home has played USC first. So that means they have become acclimated to playing the Bruins first. All right, or playing the Trojans first in terms of getting accustomed to the West Coast time, getting settled to the time zone. And next thing you know, maybe that's a different change. Sometimes it's been tough to sweep the West Coast schools in LA. And sometimes teams have walked away with stunning upsets like Minnesota or Michigan, who was at one point the Big Ten leader in the clubhouse. But why do we have to do it this way when, okay, maybe you want the games on TV every night. That's what the Big Ten really wants. During conference play, when college football is over, they want something on Big Ten Network during the football season, and then during all these other games where they have the Peacocks, all the other TV contracts, they have games on in the middle of the day on a Saturday, on a Sunday, and they can have a floating West Coast game, that the West Coast time slot, at the end of the day during the middle of the week, twice a week. 3 times a week, 4 times a week. You can have the West Coast time slot and begin it with the East Coast time slot. And back-to-back, you've got big-time names in big-time games right on nationally televised networks playing Big Ten opponents to steal it from the ACC, from the SEC, from the Big East, all these other conferences that they're jostling, swinging their weight around as to we want more money, we want more dominance, we want more national credibility, where it's like, okay, we got all that. We understand that these bigger conferences are generally going to have bigger, better, deeper teams. But the beauty of March Madness is what makes it so even. You're playing on a neutral site. You might go play Kansas and Wichita. You might go play UCLA in Los Angeles for a regional, or Anaheim. You might go play, some teams on the East Coast. All right. But generally, you're going to play a team on a neutral site when the fans, especially in the first round, are filled with like 8 different schools, 75 of which might turn on you if the Cinderella is starting to upset you in the middle of the game. If a double-digit seed is starting to upset a big-name program, they will cheer for the Cinderella. And that's why we see so many upsets, right? I believe one of the coaches, I forget who it was, for a mid-major program, I think it was earlier this year, went on a rant about you go through these there's tough calls on the road in a Big 10, a Big 12 environment that they're just not going to make with all the eyeballs on, all the betting on, all the rooting interests, the bracket busting opportunities on one of the best, sweetest, most amazing parts of the calendar in a sports season, which is March Madness. And you're like, okay, we're going to make all this money for these games that aren't going to matter when you lose in March Madness because you're getting so much travel right now in Big Ten play. Why are the UCLA women in Iowa and Wisconsin? Why has USC done that trip a month earlier? And then USC's not playing for 5 days. UCLA has to finish a road trip, play basically 2 games since USC's last played one, or a trip and then a flight home before they can prepare for what is their biggest game of the season, which shouldn't be decided by travel. It should be decided by 2 teams playing in sold-out arenas on even rest. In any other season, UCLA, USC, the women's team, they'd have a week off, or they'd be playing the same team or something on the same schedule, maybe a day or 2 different, and then coming back and playing on a similar rest schedule. All right. Now, the UCLA women, Corey Close, are like, all right, we're going to go to Paris. We'll go to Hawaii. We'll go play 3 games on the East Coast. They want the smoke. They really do. But you can't do that every single year, because not every single year are you going to be, at this moment, UCLA is not going to be the number 1 team in the country. Right now, they're number 1, number 2. Expectations are the same thing for next year. But if you have this increased travel, right? South Carolina is not going through that much travel. UConn's not going that crazy. Some of these Midwest Big Ten schools aren't doing that much crazy travel. They're only going a time zone or 2 or this way. The East Coast schools going west are going to feel it. The West Coast schools are going to feel it even more, going east 2-3 times, and then having those East Coast schools come west and just do it once and wait 4 days. How does that balance out the schedule? We've seen some of the best teams in the Big Ten on the men's side go through similar losing streaks to what UCLA's had to do. The Bruins in the beginning of January came off a pretty significant win over Gonzaga. For just UCLA as a fan base to get that Gonzaga win, even if Gonzaga is been a little overrated this year, 8, 9, 10 seed maybe, but they should be a tournament team. That was still a big win for UCLA to get in a neutral site with a fun home-like environment at the Intuit Dome. You go to Nebraska, okay, but Eric Daly Jr., so you come back to Michigan, and then you go east. What about that schedule made any sense to go to Nebraska, LA to play Michigan once and then come back? None of that made any sense. And why would Michigan State not come during that same Michigan trip? It's like you have 2 schools waiting at home to play one team, and then you bring another school and one team's waiting. What is this schedule? All you got to do is have different parts of the schedule. Right? You have the early December games. You can decide which West Coast schools are going to stay home and which West Coast schools go east. And you play that early road trip. You come back and you kind of have the conference divided between, all right, who's going west, who's going east, and you play back-to-back games, or a Thursday, Friday with an Oregon-Washington, right? And then you flip it. One team gets extra rest one day, another team gets a little less rest the next day, and you go back and forth. Not this, they've been waiting 4 days. Now, it's not going to change between any yelling from USC's coach, Eric Musselman. Mick Cronin's like, I'd say my beef in the offseason when there's nothing to talk about, but he's not going to talk about it during the season. He's going to focus on his team. The Big Ten's like, we must have 2 days off. Tom Izzo, be quiet. Every other Big Ten coach, be quiet. 1 day off or fix the schedule. UCLA, USC should be travel partners. What they're doing right now is stupid, not beneficial to anybody at all. Now you see in some professional sports, the East Coast teams with a lot less travel, It's a lot easier. They don't have as many crazy travel days, right? When you see these West Coast teams in the NHL, MLB, NBA, it's a little different when you have to go east and you're like, dude, New York can go play New York or Brooklyn in certain cities, or go to, Belmont. And then next thing you know, depending on which sport, which professional sport, then you go just a little bit to Philly, and then you go to Boston, and you go into here to Montreal if you're going across the border, Toronto, and you're back and forth. It's a little different when LA and UCLA and USC are the closest West Coast Big Ten rivals, or Oregon and Washington. That's not as close as some of these other schools have to go to when they're in the deep East, the Big East, whatever it might be. So it's a little frustrating that they can do it much better, and we're just selling our souls for no reason. The NIL, transfer portal, travel schedule, we are ruining college sports. And UCLA might be a program alongside USC, Oregon, and Washington that's going to have to pay until we either switch back to more regional scheduling, or they figure out, hey, if we're going to just go for all the money, go for the big bucks, cancel out the debt that we're going to have, except we're going to pay a lot more for travel miles and keeping up with student athlete needs, welfare, grades, nutrition, body, everything, then why not make it a little more simple than this? We need this game on Fox. We need this game on CBS at 10 a.m., 11 p.m., and then boom, 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 Eastern. Simplify it. It's okay if you don't win the day, Big Ten. You don't need to win every day of the week. Yes, you got 18 teams. Wednesday, Sunday, Thursday, Saturday. You can switch it from week to week. These teams are going to play on this day. West Coast. These West Coast schools play Wednesday, Sunday. These West Coast schools play Thursday, Saturday. You battle it out. You switch it from week to week. It can be simplified. You can still get the East Coast, West Coast you want without having schools wait for other schools to return and having a significant rest advantage and travel losses being a big thing. This isn't professional ball as much as it's basically the situation right now. We're still a step below, a rung below. Got to change that. It's ridiculous. And right now, it might hurt the UCLA women in their game against USC. It's hurt UCLA a couple times earlier this season, even during this season, in some of these key losses, when they've been sick, when they've had to go to the East, to the West, to the East. It's been a significant beast. And I like it the least. All right, speaking of the last trip for the UCLA men going east in the regular season, they played Purdue. What is important about Purdue? Big Ten preseason favorites, preseason Big Ten Player of the Year, Braden Smith, all that and more with a team that was the national runners-up in the last national championship in March Madness. No Zach Edey, but there's plenty to be fearful about, even though the Bruins are taking on a struggling Boilermaker team. All that and more next on Locked On UCLA. Attention UCLA fans, Locked On UCLA fans, the future of college sports is here and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, the NIL negotiations would happen most likely under the table. And there's no clear ways for all of us, you the fans, everybody, to directly support the athletes that you love. And now with Roy, you get to be a part of these changes, part of the wave to support the UCLA athletes in the most transparent way possible. With this NIL app, Roy, you can choose the player you want to support, decide how much you want to give, and you can get exclusive content from the athletes you get. And if they leave, if they transfer, it's backed because you get your money back. A risk-free way to show your support, and you as the fan with Roy get control. No more uncertainty. Transparent, impactful support can help shape the UCLA teams of the future and the future of college sports with your contributions. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing the UCLA Bruins athletes the way they deserve with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. All right, here we go. Rocking on with Locked On UCLA. Second segment, we're talking the UCLA battle against Purdue. Huge, absolutely huge game for the Bruins. All right, Purdue has been struggling. Their struggles have brought them from Big Ten champions to just battling to become a top 5-6 seed in the Big Ten tournament. And if UCLA wins this game, there is a realistic opportunity that UCLA can still sneak in as the double bye, the 4 seed in the Big Ten tournament. Absolutely what you want. One less game to play, one more day of rest. Now, of course, Corona would If he could forego the Big Ten tournament, I think Cronin would rather go home, rest after the USC game, and just await their NCAA tournament seeding. If he could. He's not going to say that. Nobody would ever say that. But they didn't have to go to Indiana, the state of Indiana, for the third time in like a month. They would not do it. I promise you. I promise you they would not do it unless it involved them going to the NCAA tournament in the regional final, which is being held, ironically, in Indianapolis. So there's a chance that UCLA is going to have to play in the state of Indiana if they go on a run in the tournament, in the Big Ten tournament, going to Bloomington, going to West Lafayette 4 times in a little over a month as an LA-based team. Not even in the NBA do they do something like that. And if they do that, they go on East Coast swings, which goes back to my rant in the first segment. Now here we go. Purdue, still highly thought of. Why? They're a team that was battling it out with UConn and fell in the national championship game because the UConn Huskies were just better. Didn't mean Purdue wasn't good, but the difference between Purdue losing as a 1-16 versus getting to the national championship year the next year, it's because they didn't rely only on Zach Edey. They had better guard play. Braden Smith, preseason Big Ten Player of the Year. Trey Kaufman-Renn. You've got more Purdue players that are impactful, but the thing that's going to be interesting in this game, 2 things. One, how impactful can Adaimata be in this game? He was slow to start in a game versus Ohio State where I've seen some teams play their worst offensive games. Northwestern, when they beat down Ohio State, didn't shoot the ball well. They still won by 21. Preseason Big Ten Player of the Year, Braden Smith for Purdue. Guy you're going to watch, the point guard. Great passer. One of the best passers. Maybe close to Gonzaga's Ryan Nembhard, who, if I'm getting that right, one of the best, 1 and 2 between some of the best point guards UCLA has played this year. Best passing point guards the Bruins have played this year. Smith is up there. It might be number 1, might be 1B. Those are really good players, and he is a little bit more of an offensive threat because he's put up 30-plus points a game. He's going to take his shots, unlike the Gonzaga starting point guard when the Bruins faced him. So for Smith, when he faced Ohio State in his home game in late January, he went 3 of 14 from the floor. So there is this kind of certain thing where Ohio State plays sneaky good defense, and you just shoot not so good. So maybe there's an extra added reason why the Bruins looked worse. We wanted them to dominate Ohio State when they were going to play and win ugly against the Buckeyes anyway. And we just wanted them to come out and win by 20 after that ugly end to the Minnesota game. Here we are, though. The Bruins still have a shot. You beat Purdue. You get a Michigan win versus Maryland. And all this Michigan win against Wisconsin. Huge. You get a Michigan win over Maryland after Maryland lost at the buzzer to Michigan State on a half-court heave. And you've got an absolute great chance to crawl up the standings to a top 4, top 3 spot that we weren't expecting. And ironically, UCLA was preseason picked to finish 3rd in the Big Ten. After all the travel, after all the call-outs from Mick Cronin, after all the craziness, a couple of weird losses at home, a couple of crazy losses on the road, big wins against some of the top teams in the Big Ten, here we are, and UCLA might be exactly where people thought they were. A good team in the Big Ten, which is deep. Travel would be an impact. The depth would be an issue, and they're realizing their full potential at the end of the year, where despite some of the naysayers hating on the team, saying they won't even get out of the first weekend, they have a chance to go deep as much as they have a chance to go and get outed in the first round. Against Purdue, what UCLA has to do is take care of the basketball. Purdue is just as good at forcing turnovers, and some of the worst games for Braden Smith have been when he turns over the basketball. Now, for the Boilermakers, some of their worst performances have come more on the road, even though they have been susceptible to losing at home. The best, the good, the really good Big Ten teams have been able to compete with Purdue and beat them on their home floor. Not every team, but they generally have. And you're not going to get a terrible game from a starting point guard, usually at home, against a really good team. Even against Wisconsin, I guess that's a bad example. Against Wisconsin, 2 of 10 didn't shoot that well, but that's more of the last couple of games. Generally, he's played really well. Against Michigan at home, 10 of 17 from the floor, 24 points, had 10 assists. He's had as many Braden Smith as 15 assists, but it's just more than Braden Smith. It's the whole unit that has sometimes fell asleep against some good teams. They've played some good mid-majors. They've played Alabama. They've played at Marquette. Purdue got kind of forgotten about, and then they started figuring it out during the middle part of the season where they strung together a lot of wins, making this a unique matchup. If this game were at UCLA, it'd be pretty close. I would, dare I say, favor UCLA, especially with the way the Boilermakers are playing. But a 4-game losing streak, a Purdue team that is a little confused after having a pretty sizable lead against Indiana and Bloomington, 12 points, and then getting smoked by the Hoosiers in the second half. Absolutely smoked. Makes you wonder, okay, UCLA, they're ready to go. For Braden Smith, coming off one of a worse performance, 2 for 8, less than 10 points scoring. He's alternated single-digit scoring outputs, big game, single-digit scoring output, big game, and then under 10 points with almost as many turnovers as he has points for the preseason Big Ten Player of the Year. That happens generally on the road. This is where UCLA's backcourt depth, I think, is going to be key. And Cronin finding the right lineup to guard and thrive against the Purdue backcourt. The reason why Purdue got to the final is because they had better backcourt play. They had better guards to go along with Zach Edey. They couldn't trust anybody in the year they lost in the first round as a 1 seed, being only the second ever 1 seed to lose to a 16. That's why they were susceptible. Last year, it was pretty clear. You've got the most dominant big man in all of college basketball, and you've got much better guards. All right? This year, they're leaning more on the guard play. They've got size. They've got tenacity. They're feisty. They're tough to beat. This team went and took it to Rutgers on the road in the Prudential Center. Or at least wherever in Rutgers, wherever they played that game. Well, I think it's Jersey Mike's Arena. UCLA went to Rutgers, fell a little flat. But now, I think UCLA has to feed Mata. Have to, and use the big man to their advantage. And then it's up to Cronin to figure out, is this a Kobe Johnson matchup? Because Purdue has a lot of guards who can score. If Johnson can stop one, do you alternate between Dylan Andrews, Sky Clark, and one of them is probably not going to be the superhero offensively. Dylan Andrews has not been getting that love offensively. But I wonder how much Cronin will lean on Andrews, even if he's 1 for 6, 1 for 7, just to play defense. Athletic, 6'2", a little bigger than Smith, could give him fits. And then depending on how Sky Clark goes or Sebastian Mack, you go with the really strong, rough, and tumble guard play. You mix in Stefanovic to change things up. Maybe we see Trent Perry get in this game as a much bigger point guard. Even though he's a true freshman in a crazy road environment, I wouldn't be shocked to see Cronin go to guard after guard after guard to push these guards, especially Braden Smith, who's playing 40 minutes a game. You can tucker him out. Now, yes, he's got his wind under him. He's played a lot. But it's different when you've got relentless Cronin-style defense with bigger, stronger, more physical guards that can just make his life a living hell. And that's what UCLA is going to have to do. Make Purdue play uncharacteristically bad at home. Continue their losing streak. And if UCLA follows the Mick Cronin motto of turn them over, don't turn the basketball over themselves, they will walk out of this place with a win. Easier said than done. But you feed the big fellow in the post, you keep it under 11 turnovers, and you force more than the 11 turnovers yourself, UCLA is going to walk away with a win. It really comes down to that. And be keen to look at, is Dylan Andrews in this game defensively or because he's an offensive weapon? So as much as we want to put all this pressure on Andrews to score the basketball in a much more efficient clip, how much is his athletic defense going to play a role against the Purdue point guard? Things to look out for. Next, we're going to talk the UCLA-Wisconsin matchup. Lauren Betts had a big matchup in the post, and flat out, she dominated. Talk about that next. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take the first steps, and then next thing you know, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. And with Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You can be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. You can get affordable coverage. You can get $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day, so protecting your loved ones doesn't have to break the bank. And hey, if it just goes beyond the life insurance, right? Fabric also offers free digital wills and access to investment accounts to help you plan for your children's future. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's MEET, fabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Final segment of the Locked On UCLA podcast today. The UCLA women, they are ready. They got a win awarded to them from the forfeit from Northwestern not coming out west. They dominated an opponent in Wisconsin, and I keyed in on the Lauren Betts versus Sarah Williams matchup. She's 6'4", a little undersized compared to the 6'7" Betts. UCLA came in this game heavy favorites, and for once in the last few weeks, they acted like it. They played like it. And Lauren Betts seems a little healthy after sitting out the game after the USC game, came back and played much better. What happened? Lauren Betts in 24 minutes. If she really wanted to score 40, this would have been the night. If Lauren Betts really wanted to score 40 points, this would have been her night. 26 points, 10 rebounds, an assist, a block, a steal, 0 turnovers. 0. That meant if she got the ball, she was a walking bucket. What made Lauren Betts so special in this game, with Wisconsin having a very solid post player themselves? She went 11 of 12 from the floor. She took 12 shots and missed one in 24 minutes. That's the Lauren Betts we've come to love and know. From 61% field goal percentage coming into the game, and now here she is as a dominant weapon. The UCLA starters didn't have to play more than 24 minutes. Nobody played close to 30 minutes. And this was all without Janiah Barker, who has been a little banged up after an injury a couple games ago, gutted it out against Iowa. But then in this game against Wisconsin, we've seen UCLA do this. If they don't need a player, if they think she needs a rest day, Corey Close does, she'll give it to her. Because the game on Saturday against USC is significant. It is for the 1 seed. It is for the number 1 seed in the Big Ten. Who can put inaugural Big Ten champs on the regular season banners? Who can get the 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament, where that's going to determine the all-important 1 seed and number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament? I believe UCLA is deeper and better, but they needed to play like it, act like it once on the road to prove to themselves when they come home in front of a sold-out arena at Pauley Pavilion that they are worthy of the votes that have been neglected after they lost one game against a team with one of the best players in the country in her home gym, and she played really well. And UCLA has been forgotten about, dropped as low as 5th in some polls in recent weeks, when they are the clear-cut number 1 with only 1 loss amongst these other teams with 3 losses, and UCLA's been forgotten about. Well, in this Wisconsin game, with no Barker, I talked about how Lauren Betts dominated Sarah Williams. Williams did have a decent day in 28 minutes, 22 points, 5 rebounds, but for a player who averages 19 and 10, she shot just a little bit better than 50%. Not the same. Lauren Betts provided more production with less shooting. She didn't have to shoot as many shots. Had more rebounds, so she dominated the rebounding. And Williams leads the Badgers in turnovers, had 3. And she leads her team in turnovers for the season. So it wasn't like a terrible game where she's had 8 turnovers this year. But clear difference between a national superstar, a national player of the year contender, Big Ten player of the year contender, Wooden Award contender, and a solid post player. That's the difference in level right there. And I know Betts has the size advantage. She has great footwork and wanted to prove, hey, I got a big matchup. Let's dominate. And I think, quite frankly, she did. UCLA in this game outscored Wisconsin by 20 in points in the paint. The Bruins won 91-61. So it came from points in the paint, and then UCLA finally found their footing from 3, 10 of 25, compared to Wisconsin's 10 of 25. So when the Badgers wanted to kick it outside, let it fly, they got hot from 3 in the third quarter. UCLA said, all right, let's get ready to go and put this game away. Excuse me, I said that wrong. UCLA had 10 threes. The Badgers had 4. Misread that. So UCLA beat them by 20 in points in the paint. You look at how they're distancing themselves in 3-point field goal attempts and makes, and UCLA said, we're better from three, we're better inside, second chance points were there. The score was tied a couple of times, and eventually, one of the things for UCLA, they just didn't carelessly turn it over against a team that did not deserve to be near UCLA in the scoreboard for more than 8 minutes in this game. All right, they acted like it, they played like it, and without one of their key players, they got to play the Avery Canes. They got to play Zany Asaka. They got to play Arnasalo close to 30 minutes. Gardner got red hot, hit 4 threes. She also had a double-double, 14 points, 10 rebounds. You had London Jones, double figures, 3 threes. Those are 2 players you want to be red hot for the USC game. Red hot from downtown. And if they figured it out, and if this game is the one that got their confidence, because we saw how London Jones played against USC in Pauley Pavilion in late 2023. She played well and literally led UCLA to a win. When Jones plays really well and scores, UCLA does not, will not, cannot lose. That is just the fact. When she is red hot and is playing efficiently, the Bruins will not lose. And when they go on runs, look who's making the big shots generally. You tend to see London Jones being a key part of those UCLA runs. Now, Gabriela Jaquez, 7 points, 8 rebounds. Her scoring numbers have started to dip lower and lower, but I hope Jaquez comes in and has a huge rebounding day against USC. Not so much scoring. The shooting hasn't been there for Gabs, but what is it said? All gas Gabs, that's the nickname for Gabriela Jaquez. She needs to come in, and against USC, her mentality is physicality and rebounding. And that is how the Bruins can knock off the pesky Trojans and come through with a big victory that'll put them back into number 1. Because if UCLA dominates Wisconsin, goes and wins at a very tough place to play in Iowa City, beats USC, avenging their only loss of the season, how could they not be number 1? If that doesn't happen, I will blow a gasket on the Monday show for Locked On UCLA. I absolutely will. But it was great the Bruins did not have to overplay their starters. Everybody generally had very good games, and now the focus is there. They didn't look past the Badgers and have to play another barn burner to the very end, learned from the mistakes at Iowa, escaped Iowa City with the victory. I'm not sure if the refs did, but UCLA did, working themselves into a significant battle. And I cannot wait. Cannot wait for that one on a Saturday night. Huge weekend for UCLA basketball. The men and the women can change the whole perspective of what March Madness looks like for each of them. A 1 seed on the line for the other, and a double bye at number 4 seed, 3 seed in play for the UCLA men. Right here on Locked On UCLA. Stick with us. Like, comment, subscribe, download. I'm going to tell you all about it after the games, post games, everything. Love it. Hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.